Thank you, Gelson, and hello and a very, very warm welcome to everyone here, both in the room and online. So today I'm talking to you about relationships. Now, every human being has relationships, which means that each and every one of your clients has relationships. So it's really a good thing to know how to help people when they're struggling coming out of difficult relationships. Now, I hazard a guess that everybody in this room would know someone who was in a relationship where, yes, they might have their ups and downs, but at the end of the day, they always have each other's back. So I'm seeing some heads nodding around the place. Yes. Okay. I love that. I love those sort of relationships, but that's not what we're talking about today. I used to be a relationship coach doing couples coaching. So I've done all that side. I teach that. It's my biggest selling course online is your conventional relationship coaching. But a best-selling course online also has to do with the difficult relationships or the toxic relationships. Now, I used to talk about narcissistic abuse, and then I decided to take that label off because I'd have clients coming along and they were in, let's face it, hideous relationships. And they'd say, oh, my husband's not a narcissist, and then they'd go into this whole defensive mode. So now I just talk about traits, toxic traits of people without really sticking a label on, because the main thing is we want to raise awareness of what people have been going through. And I'll just give you a very quick example using myself. So 30 odd years ago, when I was a young woman and not long had a baby, I went along to see a counsellor because my relationship was shite, actually. So, and I had a new baby. So I went along to see this counsellor and I was telling her about it. And she said, well, you're being bullied, you're being abused. And I'm like, no, I'm not. He never hits me. And that was kind of the standard of back in the day. If you weren't getting physically abused, you weren't in an abusive relationship. But we know a lot more than that now. So yes, there may be physical abuse in some relationships. Unfortunately, there is in far too many relationships. Well, I know particularly in New Zealand, it's rife. So today I'm talking about how to help your client get through the fallout, the aftermath of being in one of these relationships. Because let's face it, any relationship that breaks up, it's hard. It's hard. There's going to be tears. There's going to be all sorts of angst. But these ones are uber. They're uber. What people are going through to try and get their lives back because they've probably forgotten who they are. They've had to keep the peace or whatever for so many years. If you don't know what goes on in these relationships, it's harder to help your client. Now, I got into this because I was doing coaching, and it's probably about 15 years ago now, this would be. And I would have mostly women, to be honest, come to me and for some general coaching thing. And then we'd start talking about what was going on in their lives. And, I had a system where we went back in time and looked at things. I wasn't a hypnotist at this point in time. And as we went through this, we could see where things had happened in their life, and then the tears would come, and then it would all come out about the relationships. And, I had never had any desire to be a relationship coach, but this is how I got into it. And then finding that some of these women were actually now physically ill. because of being in this relationship. One woman was hospitalized so many times with major asthma. And I said to her, whatever her name was, Mary, when did you start having asthma? Have you had this since you were a child? Or when did you start? And she thought about it and she said, oh, actually, it was when I met Bob, or whatever his name was. When I met Bob, oh, was it? Okay. Right. And then I started to dig a little bit underneath with the coach approach, and it all came out. So that's the other thing. People's lifespan can actually be shortened by being in a toxic relationship. So let us have a look. Let's flick this one on. Okay, so feeling safe is the single most important criteria for a relationship. Safe on all levels. Does everyone agree? Nodding heads? Awesome. Okay, so that is the relationship we all want to be in. Now, while I'm primarily talking about intimate partner relationships, it also spins out into families. And I've actually lately had more people coming to me because of their toxic family members. Friends, work colleagues exhibit these toxic behaviours, these traits of perhaps narcissism, borderline personality disorder, things like that. But again, I'm not putting labels, I'm just using the word toxic to cover all of this. Okay, so a toxic relationship is one that consistently undermines your sense of well-being, happiness, and at times safety. Okay, so do we want to be in that sort of relationship? No, we don't. Not at any part of our life. Not particularly when we think we've fallen in love with someone and it ends up to be that consistently we're being undermined and starting to feel unsafe. So let's have a look. Come on. Okay, signs of a toxic relationship. So let's start at the top. This is not in any particular order. Manipulation. Some people are master manipulators. And if you're not aware, a lot of their behavior just goes unchecked and you get guilt tripped and all sorts of things like that. A lot of this manipulation was learnt in childhood. In fact, most of these behaviors were learnt in childhood. Okay, so coercive control. Anyone who has dealt with victims of domestic violence will understand what coercive control is. Okay, so it's like somebody says, you do this or else this is going to happen. So that's just a very tiny, in a nutshell, coercive control. No human being wants to be controlled. No one. Control comes from, it certainly doesn't come from love. It comes from a fear and an insecurity where someone feels they have to control everything and everybody. Again, it stems from childhood. Tomorrow in my workshop, we're digging deep into where all this stuff comes from. Okay, economic abuse. Well, that's a huge one. But you think about the person that has to submit all their receipts for anything to the other partner. And then it's minutely, ticked off, or you might have spent a bit too much. Why did you go there? Oh, no. And so there's that side of it. Now, that happened a lot in the older generations. Hopefully not so much now. The other thing with economic abuse, and I mean, there's many things that I can't obviously go through all of them this morning, but the other thing with economic abuse that I've seen that is rife, particularly with internet dating, which is something that I loathe for very many reasons, but okay, and actually a guy said this to me. He said, well, when I'm looking for someone to date, he said, I look for a woman with a house. And I said, well, what about if you see someone and you've got common interests and you know, she's a really nice person? Now, I'm not saying this doesn't happen the other way around either. This is not a gendered thing. But no. She's got to have a house. Well, in New Zealand, and I don't know about the law in Aussie or the US or Canada, after 3 years, you get half of everyone's everything, their life savings, their whatever they've achieved. So if you've got someone that's got a house, that's an asset. So it really wasn't about whether it was the right person, it was about what that person had. And so that's economic abuse too. Stopping someone from working is economic abuse, making them depend on you and then having a very tight rein on the money. So lots and lots of things. Sexual abuse. And you might be thinking, what, in a relationship? Yes. So it might start off really good. And often with these types of relationships, it starts off, it's highly sexual, there's all this chemistry, and that's all it's really based on. But after a while, it really starts to get weaponized. Sex gets weaponized in a lot of relationships in very many ways. Whether it's wanting someone to do something that's highly uncomfortable for them, or even bad for their health, all sorts of things like that, as well as other forms of abuse like verbal abuse and putting people down and all that sort of thing. So yes, sexual abuse. And then people say, well, when I met them in the beginning, it wasn't like that. Oh God, we were like rabbits, you know, it was really good. But now it's terrible. So verbal abuse, well, name calling. Think about kids in the playground. What, you know, the nastiness of kids in the playground. I was a teacher, so I know what kids are like. And you can get this in relationships, and it's unrelenting. This is the whole thing. It's unrelenting. Day after day after day. What does that do to someone? We all know that that's not good. Okay, psychological abuse, gaslighting, trying to make someone disbelieve themselves and actually feel like they're going crazy and being told that you're going crazy. Now, the word gaslighting comes from an old movie, I think it was 1944 or something, where a guy was trying to drive his wife mad by fiddling with the gas lights and then telling her that it hadn't happened. And so you start to lose your own sense of your intuition going by your gut because you're being told something else. It's insidious. It's an insidious thing, gaslighting. Psychological abuse, now there's many things, again, I can't go through them all, but one that really gets on my wick is some of these toxic people will do something like drive dangerously to scare you. Now, I've had it happen to me, and not that long ago either. Well, I should have had that on the other side, never mind. Not that long ago either, and it is really scary. Why would someone do that? Because they're playing mind games all the time. They're trying to make you feel something. And that something is not something nice. Okay, emotional abuse. Are you allowed to have any emotions? Can you have any needs or wants? Or is everything about them? And so emotional abuse is huge. what are you crying for? And it might be something like, your best friend just died. Oh, why are you crying? What's wrong with you? There must be something wrong with you. You need to go and get help. All this type of thing. Now, emotional abuse, there's lists like this of what emotional abuse is. I can't go there right now, but just giving you an idea. Physical abuse, obviously you're being hit, you're being pushed around, whatever it is that they do. Perhaps they're alcoholic or perhaps what's even more insidious is they never actually hit you, but they threaten in a kind of roundabout, underhand way that if something, and again, we're probably going into the coercive control, if something doesn't happen the way they want it, then, something might happen to you physically. And that is enough often to actually control people. So physical abuse, for the police to come has to be physical, but there's this element of physical abuse. It is just the threat. So you could call it psychological abuse. You could call it emotional abuse. A lot of these things cross over. Religious, spiritual abuse. So let's say you meet someone and they know that you're a particular religion or you have particular spiritual beliefs and they're okay with it. That's fine. You do, whatever it is you want to do. You go to church on Sunday or whatever. You meditate. But after a while, no, they're trying to stop you. There's always some reason why you shouldn't be doing that. You should be giving them attention and then start to get nasty about how stupid you are believing whatever it is that you believe. Technological abuse. Now, this, of course, gets worse as we get more technology. So technological abuse now, I think, has gone into people putting a GPS on you. There's a GPS on your car. It used to be that someone would take the mileage of your car in the morning and then take it again in the afternoon, in the evening to make sure you hadn't been too far. Where have you been? Why have you done this many Ks or miles? Where have you been? Now, you just put a GPS on the car, or even worse, on the person. And of course, that's against human rights, but it does happen. And it happened to a client of mine. Her husband was, I think, working in the mines in Western Australia. I could be wrong, but overseas, anyway, at the time, he kept a GPS on her car and she had to actually account for everywhere she'd been during the day to him at the end of the day, or else he'd go off his face at her, essentially. And she'd been with him since she was 17 years old. She knew nothing different, and he'd just passed away, and she didn't know who she was. No idea, 17 years old. Didn't know who she was. She'd been through all of this, including physical abuse, 4 children for all those years. Health abuse. Now, this is an interesting one, particularly when you're older, because your health mightn't be as good as it is when you're in your 20s or your 30s. If you're depending on someone, let's say you're really not well, you're depending on someone to go and get your medication, all sorts of things like that, but they won't do it. They won't do it, or they'll just leave you when they should be there because there's something wrong with you. All those things. Oh no, I don't think you should be taking that medication. Now, I've seen this happen quite a few times, but they're not doctors. But this whole controlling, in fact, I know one guy that did that to his wife, was dying of cancer. She was, she didn't have that long to go. She was in a lot of pain. she was at home, he wouldn't get her medication. So his sister went and got it and then got abused by him for doing it. He didn't get the medication for it. He was off with his new girlfriend. He'd already lined up the next one, you see, because, he didn't want to be by himself. So he'd lined up the next girlfriend. And so he wasn't really interested if his wife, who was terminal, was in pain. I was like, just defied belief, really. But this is absolute true story. Absolutely true. Neglect. Now, neglect is a big one. Neglect, just never home, never talking to someone, just treating someone like shite. I just don't care, don't care. You're just another piece of the furniture. But neglect has severe consequences for all humans, not just children, all humans. Neglect is not a good thing. Okay, so let's have a look at the toxic relationship cycle. Now, this is something you want to get your head around. Okay, so that you know what to tell your clients. So the first phase of this is idealize. Put you up on a pedestal. Believe me, you don't want to be on a pedestal. Okay. Devalue and discard. That's the cycle. It's well known. Idolize, devalue, discard. So let's have a look at what that actually means. So here we have idolize. And you'll see we've got a picture here of masks. Masking. So you meet someone and not just, you go on your first date with someone, you're going to be putting your best foot forward, aren't you? You're going to be trying to sort of make a really good impression. But this is different. This is when someone is essentially wearing a mask and that's not who they really are, but they're trying to pretend to be who you want them to be. So this whole masking thing, and of course this is rife on internet dating because there's no real accountability. It's not like it's a friend of a friend or someone from your local night school or something like it used to be in the old days. Nobody knows this person. So they can put on any mask they want. They can say anything they want, be anything that they want. So masking, love bombing. There's the flowers and the chocolates and maybe really expensive trips or presents or anything like that. And of course you're thinking, oh my goodness, this person, and again, this is not gendered. It's just that I have more female clients than I have male clients. So I tend to have more stories, that way. I think, oh gosh, this is amazing. This person is so good. Yeah, love bombing. That's one of the tactics used in cults. So it's not as good as what you think. So love bombing, mirroring. So they're trying to be you. They're watching every single thing that you're doing, your facial expressions, everything, and they're mirroring back. Future faking, talking about the future. Talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. Action is what really matters. So you can talk about the future and fake anything, basically, that sounds wonderful. Oh, we'll be going on a world cruise in 2027 and this, that, and the other. Really? You can say anything. It's actually doing the actions. Overprotection. So overprotection in the name of love. Love in inverted commas. So I'll give you an example of myself, actually, though I wouldn't say it was in the name of love, but anyway. So not that long ago, I had it was more of a friendship than anything else with a guy. And I was talking to him. I hadn't moved house at that stage. I lived in the country. I had a big lot of land. I had a clinic there, absolutely beautiful, looking out over the duck pond. I was having issues with my dog wandering, so I wasn't wanting to leave the gate open. Long, long story. We don't need to go through it all. Anyway, I was thinking, should I be seeing clients from home anymore, or should I actually take it out of home? Because the clients loved to put their feet up on the hypno chair and look down the valley. So I said to this guy, I wonder about seeing clients from home. And he says, a woman on her own shouldn't be seeing clients from home. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. And you can see there's a little bit of merit in there. So, yeah, a bit of merit. So, yeah, maybe he's got a point. So I went to a place where there's a few practitioners, and the next sort of little town, it's a beach resort over from where I was. And it looked like I could get a room there or share a room there. So I said to him, I might share a room down at such and such a clinic. And he said, but that's nearly 15 minutes away from here. And you'd be gone 2 days a week. And I'm like, this guy wasn't living with me at all. And I'm going, yeah, if I've got clients, for 2 full days, but oh, no. You don't want to be doing that. You'll get too tired. I'm like, oh, I don't really think so. And I would have been working with lovely people. Anyway, it didn't come to pass for other reasons. So then I thought, well, I finally said to him, well, actually, I could just go to the local community centre because lots of counsellors and other sort of therapists work from there. And they're really friendly and great down there. Oh, I don't like some of the people that go there. No, I don't think you should be associating with some of those people. And I'm like, you're kidding. That's really good. It's got a great atmosphere down there. So many therapists operate out of there. No, I don't think so. Maybe you should just keep it online like you did over COVID. I'm like, well, yeah, I do that anyway. I've got online clients, but some people want to come in person. Oh, no, it should really only be. He just didn't want, he wanted to shut me down completely. And so, but he was protecting me. So, you have to be able to get your head around this. And if you haven't had those experiences in the past, sometimes you can't. Okay, so isolation, of course, it's all got to be about them. So you have to give up everything. And they like to isolate you. So you're away from family and friends. And you lose your backup systems. So you're isolated. Now, when I moved to this country town I was talking about, where I had the big piece of land, and I worked out of a clinic there, and I was gobsmacked. I was a girl from the city, and what went on in these towns where women had fewer choices for employment was astonishing to me. Even I was in my 50s probably then. Even then, I could not believe what went on. They were isolated on farms, didn't have the options that the women in the city had for employment, isolated in some of the ways they were treated. We won't go there today. Playing the victim, of course. So someone with narcissistic tendencies or traits is either the victim or the hero of anything. It's never their fault, never. They blame everybody else. The finger always points at somebody else. So by this stage, you might be recognizing a few people you know, or a person you know. Could be old Auntie Myrtle, she's got a few of these traits, or whatever. People often have aha moments. Sometimes they do get triggered, so Just letting you know. Boundary issues. Well, boundaries? You're kidding. You can't put boundaries in place. No, because they're going to cross them every single time. Okay. So this is just the start. This is the idealized phase. Let's crack on to the next one. So what we have here, devalue. Devalue. So put you up on a pedestal, and then they sort of go, ugh, and start to push it off and devalue you. Triangulation. So triangulation is often with another human being, another man or a woman. It can be with something like a job that's often used. Something where you're not the most important person in the relationship. They're introducing something else that is taking priority over you in the relationship. Okay, criticism, yes, unrelenting criticism. Everything you do just about is criticized. Insults delivered in jokes, that's a favorite. Oh, I was only joking, but it was something really nasty that might have been said in front of friends or family or even out with strangers. Oh no, it was just, can't you take a joke? Oh, goodness sake, you can't take a joke. But there was nothing funny about it. It was probably something quite humiliating. Nitpicking, following you around, literally picking on every single thing. I had a client, and the guy she was with used to follow her around like a dog, you know, be following around. There's a spot on the floor, clean it. There's, you know, that sort of thing. Literally nitpicking. Women do it too, guys. It's not just the men. In fact, men need help. So if you are a male therapist, you know, there's actually a big opportunity for you to be helping men coming out of this kind of relationship because they're lost. Gaslighting, as we mentioned before, trying to get you to question your own reality and believe that you are going crazy. That's what they want, for you to believe that you are going crazy. They can tell everyone else that you're crazy. And of course, they're perfect. Jailing. Well, jailing is when basically they don't want you to go anywhere or do anything except with them. So when I moved to this small country town 10 years ago to be with a guy, I moved in there with him, and we'd been seeing each other for a little while, but not that long. As soon as I got there, I said, I didn't know anybody, no one in that town at all. And I said to him, I'm going to go into town and get a latte, because, you know, it was not long out of the city. I'm going to go and get a latte. And he was a retired farmer. Latte, you know, sort of thing. Yuppies have lattes. And I said, well, too bad. I like my coffee. And he said, well, you can't go into town on your own. And it was 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, oh, you'll be ruining my mental health if you do that. And I'm like, this is no word of a lie. No word of a lie. Okay. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because we hadn't had any of this before. And he says, well, you might just take off and go. And I'm like, FFS, I just moved here. Just moved all my stuff here. I'm not going anywhere. And so every single day I'd get the same thing, that I was compromising his mental health by going into town. And I was just like, oh, but I'd also say, well, come with me. I wasn't trying to cut him out or anything. I just said, well, come with me, you know. No. Okay, so it's enough of jailing. Silent treatment, not speaking to you for a whole weekend or weeks on end. I had some guy come to me years ago and he said, my wife left me after 26 years. The kids are all gone. They're gone to live in Australia, taking the grandies with them. He said, I don't know why. And I'm like, oh, okay, tell me more. Tell me a bit more. I was coaching at the time. I wasn't doing it. He said, well, sometimes I wouldn't speak to her for 3 weeks at a time. But I don't know why she left. So the whole silent treatment is part of the narcissistic traits. If someone's giving you the silent treatment, yeah, they're doing it on purpose. Intimidation, of course, we know what that is. That's fairly obvious. Many ways of that. And threats, as I said, could be the threat of violence. Could be the threat of violence to your pets. All sorts of things. So that's when they're starting to devalue you, and then we get into discard. Okay, got your suitcase packed. Cruelty, contempt, coercive force and rage, depending on if they're a loud rager, screaming and yelling at you, or whether they're sitting silently, like that jailing one I was telling you about, that would sit there and seethe, and absolutely seethe. And you'd be sitting there thinking, holy shit, what have I done wrong now? But it was nothing. So, oh, is it something I've done? No, I'm angry with the world. Oh, God. Escalation of verbal, emotional, financial, and or physical violence, betrayal. So they love having affairs. A lot of toxic people love having affairs, against not gender-based. It can be in terms of guys going to prostitutes. That's another common one. Excuses. I've never heard the most ridiculous excuses in my life, even from kids, as you hear from some of these toxic people. Just crazy. And of course, once you get to this stage, they know that you're onto them. You've seen through their behavior and they can't stand it because they've got to be perfect. They can do no wrong. And suddenly you might start questioning some of their behavior. So this is where all this comes in. They escalate everything. Minimize what they've done to you, even if it was something absolutely awful. Really, really awful. Minimize. And they blame the victim. Finger is pointing, and it's pointing at you. Always. And discards the victim temporarily or permanently. Now, this can go either way. It can actually be the victim who discards the toxic person. After a while, they'll try and hoover you back, called hoovering from the Hoover vacuum cleaner. Alrighty, so that is the pattern of the relationships. It's not nice. It's really not nice. Who wants to go into a relationship where all or some of this is going to happen? No, nobody. And so when they come out, they're in an absolute mess. All right. So, smear campaign. When a toxic individual can't control you, they're going to make sure they badmouth you to absolutely everyone that they can. Let me tell you, when you're in a small town, it's not good. So this guy was going around town telling everyone I was a witch. Now, I don't do Wicca. He meant that sort of witch, not the bee one. But yeah, it got quite uncomfortable for a while. It came right, of course, but it got quite uncomfortable for a while because suddenly they go into a frenzy. Oh my God, what if people believe her or him? What if they believe the victim? I'm exposed. And so they're going to smear your name. They may also try and I've seen this happen quite a few times, and one quite recently, they might try and get you fired from your job. That is a common one. Lose your livelihood. They want to destroy you. So that is one way of doing it. Okay. Here we've got the judge. And societal judgment, victim blaming. Now, in New Zealand, we've recently had a campaign on Facebook from Victim Support, which of course works with the police, to support victims of crime. And it's been about don't blame the victim, because victim blaming has kind of become a thing. I don't know if it's the same here in Aussie or elsewhere, but it's become a thing in New Zealand. So people come out of these relationships and they're in a mess, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physically. It serves you right. You shouldn't have got with that person. You should have known. But hang on a minute. That person was love bombing them. How did they know? There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. Again, it's the finger pointing. Something wrong with you. You made your bed. Now you can lie in it. That's the real old school one. That's my mother. You made your bed, now you can lie in it. And marry in haste, repent at leisure. All these things. But at the end of the day, how did you know? How did you know that this wonderful person who was doing all this stuff for you wasn't wonderful at all? So, red flags. You don't know what you don't know. You just don't. So I had a woman come to me, again, many years ago, and she came for coaching. And she had, it wasn't a plaster, but her arm was in a sling. And she was an older woman, a lot older than me at that time. And we got chatting away, And she said, I said to her, oh, what happened to your arm? That looks painful. What happened to your arm? And she says, she got all tearful. And she said, oh, it's this guy that moved in with me. And I said, oh, okay. Yeah, she said, oh, yeah, my husband died. And she'd been married for 35 years or something. My husband died. And, I met this guy online. And he was lovely. Oh, he was so good, blah, 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 blah. But when he moved in, because there's always a tipping point, and it might be moving in, it might be getting married, it might be getting pregnant. There's some tipping point there. But when he moved in, he changed. He changed and he wasn't nice at all. He was horrible. And then he started hitting me. And she said, I didn't know what to do. See, my husband was a lovely, lovely man. She said, my parents loved each other. They were wonderful. My father was just great. She says, I've never struck anything like this before. You don't know what you don't know. And this poor woman, she was having to have an operation on the arm because it was in such a bad state. She had to get her son to come from somewhere down the line and turf him out. And she was so ashamed that she had to call on her son to get rid of this guy. But he'd obviously done damage, quite a lot of damage to her arm. So that's just an example. You don't know. And funny enough, I was talking about this at some talk I was giving, and someone said to me, well, if she came from such a nice family and she had such a nice husband, what's wrong with her then that she accepted that guy? And I'm like, here we go. It's her fault. Let's blame the victim. You don't know what you don't know. Okay, so trauma bonds. So this is an interesting one. So this is when you go through periods of intense love and excitement. So that's like in the beginning. That was like the love bombing. And then you get periods of abuse and neglect, and so you get the good and the bad, the good and the bad. And so that creates a chemical and hormonal bond that is stronger than what your normal bond would be. And so when people say, well, why didn't they just leave? Trauma bonding is often one of the reasons. There are many other reasons as well, but this is one of them. And that's why victims often say it's so hard, because they're so deeply attached to this person. Relational trauma. So adult relational trauma is pain from childhood that has remained unconscious and unprocessed. Okay, so I've heard it said that relational trauma is at the root of all trauma. It's our first trauma. It can start as early as being in the womb. Okay. Toxic shame, a debilitating pathology that comes from being repeatedly treated as useless, rejected, humiliated, and even loathed. I mean, look, there's many quotes on these sorts of things, but I just picked these ones out. So, toxic shame. So you get a client come to you. Okay, so tell me, about your relationship or something else. They don't want to say. They don't want to say because they're ashamed. They're ashamed that they got with that type of person, but they didn't know what they didn't know. So it wasn't actually their fault. And yes, if in your childhood years you have had adverse childhood experiences, as very many of us in this room probably have had, you are more susceptible to getting with a toxic person because you're used to tolerating the nonsense. That's probably how you survived. It was a survival mechanism. So what you will tolerate is what they will do. So show someone how you will be treated. Don't accept the bad treatment. But it's not your fault that you had adverse childhood experiences, but it is your responsibility to heal them. Now you're an adult. So these are some of the things that clients present with. I'm sure you've heard quite a few of these yourself, no matter what your niche may happen to be. I'm worthless. I'll never be enough. It was all my fault, because they've always been told that. I feel like I'm going crazy. Well, someone's been gaslighting you. Why wouldn't you? I'll be alone for the rest of my life. Now the clock starts ticking if you're single and thinking, oh, I don't want to be, I've got the next however many years. I don't want to be on my own. But what are you going to accept to have someone in your life? That kind of nonsense we've been talking about? I don't think so. People can see how flawed I am. It's not safe to be in a relationship. Of course, there are safe relationships. There are wonderful relationships. But if you've been mostly in the other sort, you don't really know that. People believe I'm bad, probably because you've been told you're bad, maybe right from the time you were a toddler. There's something wrong with me. So let's have a look at what we can do to help. So awareness. So this is sort of advice basically for your clients. Become educated about the dynamics of toxic relationships. You're not alone. Now, so many people come and they feel like they're alone. It's just them that this is happening to, because, they're such a bad person and they're so ashamed. It's just them. It's not. It's happening all over the world. It doesn't matter what sort of demographic it is, it's happening. Okay, acknowledgement. acknowledging that the person you were with is high in toxic traits. That's who they are. It's who they are. It's not your fault. You're not going to change them if they don't want to be changed. And the majority of them do not want to be changed. They're not going to be coming to therapy. And it's also not your responsibility. So many people are overly responsible. Put my hand up, I'm one of them. And that was what we were taught going through life. And so you're, listening to Dr. Petra yesterday, you may be in an archetype that is like that, overly responsible. And accepting you've been in an abusive relationship. Maybe you were the victim then, but you're not now, you're the survivor. And as I said, it's not your fault if in childhood you had adverse experiences, but you need to do something about it when you're an adult, because you don't want to be taking your baggage, your shite into the next relationship and polluting that. So take action to heal from the past. See someone who specializes in the area, who actually understands how these things work, because what I've seen is so many people who have been re-traumatized by going to see the wrong person who has no clues and is possibly trying to use conventional, let's say, relationship coaching type of thing, but it doesn't work in these situations. The problems are different. The problems are so more severe. So see the right person, use meditation, visualization, inner child work, mindfulness, they all help. It is a journey, and I've got a program called Journey Back to Self. It is a journey back to yourself when you're coming out of one of these relationships. And that journey can take a long time. There's no magic bullet. It can take a long time. Now, people in this room will have probably many modalities they can use that will be helpful to people coming out of these relationships. So this is just something I've created this year, Journey Back to Self. It's kind of a self-help program, but it's good for any of you who want to actually be able to refer to something. There's a journal, there's a workbook, there's an ebook, and I've got an app as well. So, you could use bits and pieces of that. You can't rebrand it, it's not one of those, but you can certainly use bits and pieces in your practice to help people. Some people respond very well to journaling about their experiences. Others respond in other ways. And so there's many, many tools that you can employ. So you can find that there on my website, Journey Back to Self. It's only $27 New Zealand dollars. So not expensive, because I want people to be able to help these people. And so that's me. So if anyone has got any questions, we've got about 5 or 6 minutes. Yeah, yeah, Trish. Oh, yeah.
So there's 2 questions from online.
Yep.
I've chosen to remain anonymous.
Sure, no worries.
So the first one, how do you help someone who picks men who abuse them physically and emotionally? They seem to be deaf, dumb and blind towards it.
Educate them. Psychoeducation is the way to go. You don't know what you don't know. So if they're just going through with no education about why they're picking these people, they need to be educated. So something like what I was just talking about, the journey back to self, would be useful if this person's a therapist to start using something like that. Yeah.
And the other one, you mentioned earlier on in the slides about health abuse.
Yes.
And people not giving medication or letting those people down.
Yes.
What about people who continually bring junk food and make the other person feel guilty for not eating it with them.
Yes, you could call that a type of health abuse.
They're a feeder as well, like they're
A feeder. Okay. Now I know of someone who, this little anecdote could be helpful. A friend of a friend who married a feeder. She was a bank manager, a very switched on woman. She married a feeder, and this guy used to make her overeat all the time, and she got bigger and bigger and bigger. She really didn't want to, but the person was a feeder. So yes, you could call it health abuse. Absolutely. Yeah. Any questions from the house? We've got about 5 minutes. All right.
I was just thinking, obviously people would only come to see you once they're there, or do you have people coming thinking they want to solve another problem, and you discover that they're in the toxic relationship?
Bit of both. Early on in the piece, it was more they would be coming for something else, and then it would kind of quietly come out that actually the relationship was what was creating so many of these problems or even illness, which started me down the road. Now I'm more known for when you've got out of the relationship, helping then. But sometimes, people don't want to believe they're in an abusive relationship. That's the bottom line. They don't want to believe it. So yeah, sometimes you have to just talk them through some of these things and say, and what I say these days is I try and keep away from the labels. I say, well, people with that sort of personality, and I don't say what the personality is, their behavior tends to be like this. And then I'll give some examples, and you can suddenly see the lights going on. And this could even be like, say, for a family member, and you see the lights going on. Oh, that's exactly what they do. Oh my God. Yes. Yes. It's not me. Oh, thank God. It's not me. That's what their personality's like. Yeah.
Making change if they're not willing to get out of the relationship. It's about getting them into awareness of what they're going to do.
Awareness is number one for everyone. Awareness is number one. Get them to be aware in their conscious mind. Yeah. And actually, and then talking to them about patterns, like this is the pattern of that particular behavior. And then they suddenly start to understand. And it takes it away from them, because if you've always had the finger pointed at you, it's your fault, you start to internalize that. So yeah, it is psychoeducation. Absolutely, Karen. Yeah. Anybody else? So Alita. Oh, no, sorry. No, we'll go.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. So I have a couple who the wife came to me because her husband had cheated on her, and we did all the work to build her up, her self-esteem. And after a while of therapy, she said, I think I need to just have a little separation from him. And I'm like, good, if that's how you feel, do that. So they separated. And in the meantime, I worked with her to build her up, confidence and stuff like that. And then the therapy kind of stopped. But then a few months later, she messaged me and said, I've taken him back. Okay. But she has such amazing self-awareness now. She's torturing him. Oh, yeah, so she's yeah, but they've got kids, so you can't. The way you're saying victim blaming, you see how that can switch, and you can't blame her.
It can switch. It can switch, and if you spend too long with them, you can sometimes start to become them.
Really, many ways, controlling and putting devices to track him. And financially as well.
Yes.
Like now he's so scared to lose a family. And the poor kids, they're suffering as well. So it's coming back now to retrain her on making a decision about stopping the abuse herself. you know, to stop the abuse against her, because she's doing it inadvertently without meaning to, but it's that I'm going to hit back or take back control.
Take back control. She had a good teacher, but it's backfired on him. Have we got time for one? We have to wrap up now. Quick ones, Alita.
And people stuck in relationships because they're ashamed of themselves.
Yes, yes. Like I was saying before, people feel alone. It's only them. They're ashamed. The finger's been pointed so much at them. It's their fault. It's their responsibility, and so they won't do anything about it. Yes, exactly. That's the legacy of toxic shame. Thank you, everyone.